The nation froze as Jasmine Crockett confronted Ted Cruz under blinding lights. His charity for dying children was no lifeline. It was a goldmine for power and politics. Millions watched as she exposed every lie with numbers no one could deny. When justice speaks this loud, can even a senator escape the fall? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The chamber was silent, yet it throbbed with tension under the blazing lights. Every camera zoomed in, beaming the scene to millions of Americans who held their breath. At the witness table, Ted Cruz adjusted his tie, his smirk curling like a blade. He leaned into the microphone, eyes sharp with mockery. "Ms. Crockett, do you think you can teach me about humanity? I have saved thousands of children. What have you ever done?" His voice echoed heavy with contempt, daring her to falter. Senators shifted uneasily, the weight of his challenge hanging in the air. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. Her hand rested on a thick stack of files, her expression carved in ice. She said nothing, only flipped a single page with deliberate calm, the sound cracking through the silence like thunder. Her eyes locked on Cruz, unblinking, merciless. The audience felt it. This was not just politics, it was the opening shot of war. The silence after Jasmine's cold stare was unbearable, like the breath before an explosion. Then Ted Cruz struck first, his voice rising with a practiced rhythm meant to dominate the room. "Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid Ms. Crockett doesn't understand numbers. Managing a fund is not just handing out money. We have to organize events, campaign, cover operating costs. That is how we have saved thousands of children." His words rolled out like a defense sharpened in advance, laced with condescension. He leaned back in his chair, as if he had already won, the smirk returning to his face, daring her to try and cut through his shield. Some senators nodded faintly. Others scribbled notes, the tension ratcheting tighter. Jasmine didn't hesitate. She leaned forward, her voice steady, her words carrying like steel across the chamber. "If that is the case, then explain why out of the $12.8 million raised, less than 13% ever reached hospitals. I have the 2023 IRS report right here." The papers in her hands snapped as she raised them, the sound echoing in the chamber. The weight of the evidence was visible before she even read a word. Every eye shifted to her stack of files, and for a split second the smugness in Cruz's expression faltered. Her delivery was sharp, her presence unshaken, the strike perfectly timed. Cruz forced a laugh, dry and dismissive, trying to claw back control. "The IRS, that bureaucratic machine. They see paperwork. I see the smiles of children." His tone dripped with mockery, as though mocking the very foundation of her argument. He raised his chin, projecting the air of a man who believed sentiment outweighed cold numbers. His words were meant to reduce her evidence to red tape, lifeless and meaningless, compared to his grand image of charity. The chamber stirred uneasily, as if caught between fact and theater. Cruz was playing to the cameras, but the room could feel the mask slipping. Jasmine didn't blink. With precise calm, she pulled out a single sheet stamped and signed by Texas Children's Hospital. Her voice cut clean through the noise. "Texas Children's Hospital confirms receiving only $250,000, yet Senator Cruz publicly announced $3 million. The statement landed like a hammer. Gasps rose from the audience, and the sharp sound of typing from reporters filled the air. For the first time, Cruz's smirk faltered completely, his jaw tightening as though the words themselves struck him across the face. He shifted in his seat, but Jasmine pressed on. She began to read aloud a list, name after name, of 12 hospitals, her tone steady, her pace deliberate. Not one of them received more than $200,000. Each line added weight to the avalanche, and with every figure she spoke, the atmosphere grew heavier. The chamber erupted in a low roar, senators whispering urgently, aides craning over desks, the press already pushing headlines. Cruz's face darkened, the smug veneer giving way to a tight scowl. The laughter was gone. The fight had turned, and everyone could see it. The tension in the chamber coiled tighter after Jasmine's last strike, but Ted Cruz refused to let silence claim him. He slammed his palm against the table, voice rising like a blade through the air. "Ms. Crockett only knows how to throw numbers around. The people of Texas have seen me. They have seen me in hospitals, holding children in my arms, praying with their parents. And you stand here rattling off figures, talking endlessly." His tone dripped with contempt, designed to belittle her in front of the nation. Some senators shifted uncomfortably, others leaned in hungry for the clash. The camera zoomed, catching every twitch of Cruz's mouth as if he were daring Jasmine to break. Jasmine did not blink. She leaned toward her microphone, voice steady, sharp, and with precision. If you are so confident, then let us hear from the doctors and the parents themselves. Her words cut through the chamber like a sudden crack of thunder. Reporters raised their heads, the gallery gasped, and Cruz's smirk faltered for the briefest second. She was no longer just reading from papers, she was summoning living witnesses whose truths could not be buried. The air turned electric as the doors opened at the side of the chamber. Dr. Michael Anders, chief of pediatric oncology at Texas Children's Hospital, stepped into the spotlight. His white coat gleamed under the lights, his face carved with exhaustion, but anchored by moral clarity. He raised his hand, swore his oath, and spoke without hesitation. We did not receive the funds Senator Cruz claimed. Our hospital was asked to open its doors for cameras to allow staged visits and photographs, but the resources delivered were minimal, barely enough to sustain a single wing, let alone the sweeping promises made to the public. His words reverberated like steel slicing through the illusion Cruz had painted. Murmurs swept across the chamber. Aides scribbled frantically, senators whispered, reporters typed furiously. Cruz leaned forward, his composure cracking, his voice edged with anger. Dr. Anders, do you know how much I have raised from major donors? Do you not see the hundreds of photographs of me with sick children? Those images mean hope. They show the world these children are not forgotten. He jabbed his finger into the air, his words desperate, clinging to images instead of facts. The defense felt hollow, more performance than proof, and the audience could sense it. Then the doors opened again, and the room fell into a silence so deep it seemed to crush the air itself. A woman walked in slowly, trembling, her hands wrapped around a framed photo. Her name was Sarah Martinez, mother of a little girl named Emily. She held the picture high, her daughter's frail smile frozen forever in time. Her voice cracked as she spoke, but every syllable carried unbearable weight. My daughter Emily's picture was used on flyers, she said, her tone shattering the chamber. But we never received a single dollar. She is gone, Senator. She died while you claimed you had saved thousands of children. The silence afterward was suffocating. Senators lowered their heads, some out of shame, others out of shock. Dr. Anders bowed his head, his jaw clenched. Reporters froze mid-sentence, the entire hall suspended in grief and fury. Cruz sat stiff in his chair, his eyes darting, his mouth slightly open, as though searching for a defense that didn't exist. The camera zoomed in, mercilessly capturing every flicker of panic. Across the nation, viewers held their breath, because in that moment, every staged photograph, every speech, every claim of saving children collapsed under the unbearable truth of a mother's loss. The chamber was still heavy with the echo of Sarah Martinez's grief when Ted Cruz forced himself back into the fight. His jaw tightened. His voice dropped into a low growl, sharp and defensive. Tragic, yes. Heartbreaking. But Ms. Crockett, let's not pretend you care about these families. You are exploiting the misery of one mother to score political points. Your witnesses are nothing more than props in your performance. His words lashed out, meant to wound, to reframe Jasmine as the manipulator. Some senators shifted uncomfortably, the accusation landing like a dirty blow. Cameras zoomed closer, capturing Cruz's face, sweat-beading eyes narrowing as he tried to regain lost ground. Jasmine didn't blink. She leaned forward, her tone steady, cutting through his accusation with surgical calm. If you truly believe these witnesses are unreliable, then perhaps you will explain this next one. Because this is not a grieving parent or an outside critic. This is someone who worked directly for you inside your own fund. Her words rolled like thunder. A ripple of anticipation swept across the gallery, reporters snapping to attention. Cruz's smirk faltered. His eyes darted toward the doors just as they opened. A man stepped in, shoulders, tense eyes haunted but determined. His name was David Whitmore, a former accountant who had spent 3 years inside Cruz's Hope for Children with Cancer Fund. He swore his oath, his voice shaking as he began, but with each word his resolve hardened. I personally signed off on dozens of transfers. More than $7 million was marked as operational costs. But those funds did not go to hospitals nor to families in need. They were redirected, funneled straight into a Washington-based firm, Capital Strategies Media. Gasps rippled across the chamber. David's voice steadied sharper now. The instructions were clear: maintain Senator Cruz's public image. We were told, quote, make sure the senator looks like a savior. The children only need enough to report back numbers. The room erupted in whispers, senators craning to see the document in Whitmore's hand. Reporters hammered their keyboards. Capital Strategies. Media, the name alone carried weight, known for high-dollar political advertising and image management. The implication was devastating: millions raised in the name of dying children, converted into glossy commercials and photo ops. Cruz's face tightened, the color draining from his cheeks. Still, he fought to keep control. His voice cracked, but carried, snapping like a whip. That email could have been altered, forged. Anyone can type a name onto a page. Ms. Crockett, you should know better than to put blind faith in papers waved before a camera. His tone was harsh, leaning on suspicion, trying to drag the credibility of the evidence into the mud. He jabbed his finger at Jasmine, desperate to turn the spotlight away. But Jasmine didn't rise to the bait. She simply lifted her hand, signaling the chairman. The chairman nodded, and a new figure stepped forward, a digital forensics expert, sworn in moments earlier, holding a sealed report. The expert's voice was calm, clinical, unshakable. We examined the email threads and the metadata attached. They are authentic. The documents come directly from the servers of Capital Strategies Media. The chain of custody is intact. The CC line shows Senator Cruz was copied on the directive to prioritize publicity spending over hospital aid. The effect was instantaneous. The chamber seemed to tilt, as though the walls themselves leaned in on Cruz. Gasps turned to shouts. Senators pounding the table, reporters nearly leaping to their feet. On the live stream, comment sections exploded with rage and disbelief. Cruz's jaw clenched, his lips pressed tight, but his eyes betrayed the truth: panic. His defense was cracking, the tide turning against him. The storm was here, and the current was dragging him under. The chamber trembled with tension, the silence so sharp it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. Ted Cruz leaned back, smirk curling on his lips, as if he had wrestled the moment back under his control. His laugh rang out, dismissive, almost mocking. Ms. Crockett, this is theater. You're nothing more than a cheap prosecutor playing for the cameras. One day the voters will see through this act. His voice rolled across the hall, bitter and smug, meant to crush her momentum. For a second, a few allies dared to nod in agreement, thinking Cruz had found a way to stand tall again. Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. She rose from her seat with deliberate calm, her steps echoing through the hushed chamber as she carried a small black device in her hand. Each click of her heels was like a drumbeat, signaling something heavy about to fall. She stopped at the microphone, her expression ice cold, her voice steady. Then let the cameras show this. The words cut through the air like steel. With a single press of her thumb, the speakers filled with sound. A man's voice, low and steady, rang out over the chamber. Divert $10 million to Cruz's campaign infrastructure. Use the children's fund as cover. Donors won't ask questions if we show them photos with sick kids. The words dropped like bombs, one after another, impossible to mishear. Senators jerked upright in their chairs, aides froze mid-scribble, and the gallery gasped in horror. It was no longer numbers on a page, it was a voice caught in the act. The recording continued, a second voice now confirming the scheme. Senator Cruz approved this personally. That final line cracked the hall wide open. Gasps turned into shouts. Reporters leaned forward, furiously typing. Senators whispered urgently across the aisle. The illusion shattered in real time. Cruz's smirk dissolved his face, paling, sweat beading across his brow. He lunged toward his microphone, voice raised, cracking at the edges. This is entrapment, a setup. That tape could have been fabricated. His words tumbled out too fast, more desperate than convincing. He jabbed a finger toward Jasmine, trying to push the suspicion back on her, but his gestures looked frantic, defensive. Jasmine did not answer him directly. Instead, she motioned with her hand, and a forensics expert, already sworn in, stepped forward. The expert's voice was calm, clinical, stripped of any emotion. We examined the recording and its metadata. The file is authentic. The call originated from a line inside Senator Cruz's office suite on Capitol Hill. The chain of custody has been verified. The recording is genuine. The declaration dropped like a gavel. Senators erupted in voices, some shouting for immediate investigation, others pounding their desks in disbelief. The gallery broke into chaotic murmurs, reporters nearly climbing over each other to catch every reaction. The chairman struggled to restore order, banging his gavel again and again. But the damage was already done. The chamber was on fire. Cruz slumped back in his chair, his mouth-tight eyes darting frantically. He tried one last gasp for air, voice shaking as he shouted, "This is a political hit job. They are trying to silence me because I tell the truth to America." But the words carried no weight anymore. Around him, his colleagues avoided his eyes, some shaking their heads, others staring coldly at the evidence projected on the screen. The chairman's voice finally cut through, stern and unyielding. "Order. The evidence is overwhelming. Senator Cruz, these matters will be referred immediately to federal prosecutors." The gavel struck hard, the sound ringing like a final judgment. Jasmine stepped back from the microphone, her face composed, her eyes fixed on Cruz. She didn't need to say another word. The recording, the metadata, the confirmation, it had all spoken louder than any speech. The knockout blow was complete. The chamber had witnessed the truth raw and undeniable, and the weight of it left Ted Cruz with nowhere to run. The fallout came fast, like a dam breaking. Within hours of the hearing, headlines blared across every major outlet. On CNN, the bold red banner screamed, "Cruz accused of turning children's fund into political machine." The Washington Post ran a front-page spread with the words, "From charity to campaign, Cruz under fire." Anchors spoke in urgent tones, their voices tight with disbelief, rolling clip after clip of Jasmine Crockett holding up the evidence. The scandal wasn't just a story, it was the story dominating every broadcast. America was watching, and no one could look away. In Texas, the anger boiled over into the streets. Crowds gathered in Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio, holding signs high above their heads. One banner read in bold black letters, "Money for kids, not for Cruz." Another simply said, "Shame." The chants grew louder with every passing hour, voices echoing down city streets. "You stole from our children," television crews, captured mothers pushing strollers in the protests, veterans holding flags, and teenagers with painted faces demanding answers. The sense of betrayal was raw and the fury was personal. Inside Washington, Cruz's Republican allies fumbled for cover. When reporters shoved microphones in their faces, most dodged the questions. Senator Hawthorne muttered, "I haven't read the documents yet," before ducking into an elevator. Another ally. Senator Richards snapped no comment and pushed past the cameras. The once proud coalition that had stood shoulder to shoulder with Cruz now splintered into silence. Their hesitation said it all they knew: defending him was political suicide. The air in the Capitol grew colder, Cruz suddenly radioactive even among his own. Meanwhile, the digital storm surged. Clips from the hearing exploded online, the most powerful being Jasmine Crockett lifting the printed email with the line, "Don't worry about the kids." The video racked up 10 million views in less than 48 hours, each replay a dagger in Cruz's reputation. Commentators replayed the moment in slow motion, freeze-framing Cruz's face as he realized what was happening. That look, one anchor whispered, was the moment the mask cracked. It became the image of the scandal. The second Jasmine raised her hand, Cruz's downfall began. The official consequences followed swiftly. By the next morning, Cruz was stripped from his committee assignments on Judiciary and Finance. The announcement came in a terse statement. "Until the matter is resolved, Senator Cruz will not participate in these committees." His office issued a defiant press release calling it temporary, but the damage was undeniable. Stripped of his powerful platforms, Cruz looked diminished, isolated, his swagger gone. The suspension was more than a punishment, it was a signal. Washington was turning its back. Then came the hammer from the Internal Revenue Service. In a rare late-night press briefing, an IRS spokesperson stood at the podium and declared, "We are opening a criminal investigation into the misuse of charitable funds associated with Senator Cruz's Hope for Children with Cancer Foundation." The words sent a chill through the city. The cameras caught the official's face, solemn and cold, as he laid out the gravity. The IRS wasn't auditing. They were investigating crimes. The chamber had shifted into a courtroom, and Cruz was now standing trial in the eyes of the nation. Corporate America wasted no time. One by one, companies that had donated or partnered with Cruz's fund announced they were cutting ties. A statement from a major Texas energy firm read, We cannot in good conscience continue financial relationships given the allegations. Longtime donors quietly withdrew their support, their names disappearing from campaign filings. Wealthy backers once loyal to Cruz now redirected their money elsewhere, unwilling to be caught in the fallout. It was abandonment in real time, his empire collapsing piece by piece. The ridicule hit just as hard as the outrage. Online, a viral meme swept across platforms. Side by side, it showed Cruz smiling as he hugged sick children on the campaign trail, next to the damning email projected in bold, "Don't worry about the kids." The contrast was brutal, the kind of image that no spin doctor could erase. Late-night comedians pounced, repeating the line again and again, their audiences roaring with laughter. The joke spread faster than the news, reducing Cruz from a senator to a punchline. In living rooms across America, families watched the fall with a mix of fury and disbelief. He called himself a family man, one Texas father told a reporter, shaking his head. But he stole from children fighting cancer. The betrayal cut deeper than politics. It felt personal. For years, Cruz had sold himself as the defender of families, the fighter for children. Now he was branded as something darker, the man who took their hope and turned it into campaign fuel. And so the image that had once carried him, Ted Cruz, the family champion, the children's advocate, was shattered forever. He was no longer the smiling senator with a Bible in hand and a child in his arms. In the eyes of America, he had become something else entirely. A fraud, a betrayer, a man who used sick children as props while siphoning away their lifeline. The whispers in the Capitol, the anger in Texas streets, the headlines across the nation all agreed Ted Cruz had fallen from family hero to the man who betrayed the children. What followed from the chamber was not a lull, but a shockwave as the gavel echoed. The real battle moved outside. National nonprofit alliances reacted in hours, not days, and their language was blunt enough to cut steel. They demanded full independent audits of every political charity, line by line, with subpoena power where records vanished. Hospital foundations, children's cancer networks, and watchdog groups signed joint letters that landed on agency desks like bricks. No more shadow budgets, one director said. If a politician is attached to a charity, the ledger's open, period, starting today, and without exceptions. The public made its own audit with a simpler tool. It changed the path of money. Donation lines at children's hospitals lit up like switchboards from another century, buzzing with nonstop calls. "I want this to go directly to treatment," callers said, repeating the sentence until clerks knew it by heart. Local news captured nurses stacking envelopes and moving pallets of supplies bought with sudden gifts. Churches passed plates with a new rule announced from the pulpit: no middlemen, send it straight to the ward. By nightfall, hospitals, CFOs published thank you notes, promising transparent receipts for every donated dollar, with verification numbers printed on receipts. Gratitude did not wait for ceremony. It arrived in floods of ink and email. Jasmine Crockett's mailroom filled to the rafters with envelopes from 3 time zones and handwriting from every decade. Parents wrote on the backs of medical bills, doctors scrawled between rounds, and retirees typed careful notes in all caps. "You were the voice we did not have," one mother wrote, the sentence underlined twice. "You stood up for kids who could not stand," a nurse added, sliding a photo of a bell-ringing ceremony into the sleeve. Stacks kept coming, each one proof that someone felt seen and heard again. Then the story outran the borders like a spark in dry grass. Morning programs overseas replayed the hearing with subtitles frame by frame as anchors frowned into the camera. A European weekly printed a black cover with the line, "The biggest charity scandal of the decade," and the phrase traveled fast. An Asian nightly broadcast put the matter plainly. This was about trust, and trust was a global currency. Editorial pages compared disclosure laws across democracies and found loopholes wide enough to drive a convoy through. The scandal had become a mirror, and other capitals did not enjoy what they saw reflected there. Inside the Capitol, embarrassment turned into drafting sessions that ran past midnight. Committees reconvened to shape a bill that treated sunlight as infrastructure, not a slogan. Provisions required real-time public ledgers for any charity tied to an elected official, independent trustees with veto authority, and automatic quarterly audits. Another clause barred charitable accounts from buying political media or paying consultants for image building, with penalties that actually stung. "No more loopholes," the chair announced into the microphones, gavel resting but ready. Members from both parties nodded because the cameras were on, and for once the cameras helped. Pollsters mapped the nation's mood and found the lines already drawn. More than 70% of Americans said they believe Cruz misused the children's fund, and the number barely budged after a week. In focus groups, the phrasing did not matter. People pointed to the recording and said they trusted their ears. Even among voters who had once defended him, the share who expressed confidence collapsed like a bridge with missing bolts. One researcher summarized the data with a shrug: the public hates math that steals from a child. Charts can be argued, a voice cannot. Not anymore. Out of that anger, a single image rose and held. Emily's photograph, wide-eyed ribbon in her hair, became the banner of a volunteer campaign called Justice for the Kids. Vigils formed outside hospitals where candles threw quiet halos around her poster. Children drew her ribbon in crayon and taped it to classroom windows, while coaches wore the slogan stitched into caps. Bracelets showed up in checkout lines, and on bus rails a small code between strangers, nodding at the same wound. No consultant could have manufactured it. The picture organized people by itself. When cameras found Jasmine again, the tone had shifted from spectacle to respect. On CNN, the anchor introduced her as a lawmaker who tells the truth, then let the silence stretch a beat before the first question. "This is about the promise we make to families," she said. "When we say charity, the help must actually arrive." On NBC, she repeated the same line and declined to gloat even when invited. "This is not about me," she said. "It is about trust in the children who need us." She left the studio with a thin folder under her arm, already headed to the next meeting on oversight. Audit teams then put boots on the ground, turning demands into calendars and checklists. Letters of preservation went out to every political charity warning that deletion of records would trigger sanctions. Accountants in gray suits opened boxes, mirrored hard drives, and photographed file rooms before a single binder moved. Hospitals appointed liaisons to transmit receipts securely, while watchdogs posted weekly dashboards showing which groups complied. Deadlines landed like mile markers, and for the first time, donors could watch oversight in real time. The message was plain enough for anyone to understand: clean books or step aside. Hospitals responded to the surge in direct support by building simple portals with fewer clicks and clearer promises. A progress bar showed exactly where a gift went: medication transport, a night in a family room, and how fast it reached the ward. Families received printed confirmations they could hold in a pocket instead of a vague thank you email. Clinics posted bulletin boards of funded items, from IV pumps to gas cards, each tagged with a donor number. Clarity turned out to be its own kind of medicine. It calmed people who had felt helpless. Trust rose not by speeches, but by receipts that matched the truth. The chamber was still shaking from the storm of evidence when Jasmine Crockett rose one final time. She walked slowly to the microphone, her eyes sweeping across senators, reporters, and the cameras that carried her voice to millions. Ted Cruz sat slumped at the other table's shoulders, heavy jaw locked, refusing to meet her gaze. Jasmine paused long enough to let the silence work like a drumbeat. Then her voice cut through, firm and steady. "You can buy ads, you can buy images, but you cannot buy the forgiveness of children who lost their chance to live." The words landed like a hammer echoing through the hall. Some senators lowered their heads, others stared straight at Cruz, who shifted uneasily in his chair. Reporters scribbled furiously the quote already destined for front pages in evening broadcasts. Jasmine's tone carried no triumph, no theatrics, only the gravity of truth delivered without fear. The chamber held its breath because everyone knew they were hearing the line that would live long after the scandal itself. Then she turned the spotlight back to the story that had shattered the room earlier. Emily, Jasmine said softly, was one of those children. On the screens behind her, the photo of the little girl appeared again, ribbon in her hair, her smile faint but fierce. Gasps rippled through the audience as the reminder hit like a second blow. Her picture was taken used to raise millions, but not a single dollar helped her fight. She is gone, and her family is left with a flyer instead of a future. The words cracked even the sternest faces in the room. The image of Emily spread across the chamber like a shadow no one could ignore. Members of the gallery wiped their eyes, reporters slowed their pens, and even the chairman gripped his gavel tighter as if steadying himself. Jasmine's voice sharpened, every syllable piercing through the silence. Emily is not just one child. She represents every family who trusted every donor who believed and every child who deserved more than a photo op. The truth was no longer a scandal, it was a wound carved into the conscience of the nation. From there, Jasmine lifted her head and delivered the lesson that the whole country needed to hear. Transparency is not a choice, she declared. It is an obligation. Her words echoed like law carved into stone. Politics has no right to exploit suffering for power, and a single brave voice can expose an entire system of lies. The hall thundered with the weight of those lines, and for a moment even the cameras seemed to bow under their force. It was not just an indictment, it was a warning. Ted Cruz tried to shift, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. His face was pale, his eyes darting, but he could not find words that mattered anymore. The investigation loomed like a guillotine, and his allies had already stepped back into the shadows. Every sound in the room pressed down on him, the scribble of pens, the clicking of cameras, the murmur of senators. He was no longer the man holding a Bible and hugging children. He was the man caught siphoning hope into power. His fall was not loud, it was absolute. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.